It's Craig from Craig's To-Do List with our latest Book Buzz segment. I'm here today talking with Jeff Kramer. He's an author for his very first novel called Mud Season, published by Kohler Books and released on March 25th. Um, Jeff has been a newspaper reporter and a humor columnist for 35 years. He's an award-winning journalist. His stops have included the Los Angeles Times, the Boston Globe, the Orange County Register, the Post Standard in Syracuse, and the Metro West News. Um, he's also produced three comedic plays in Syracuse. He's a Seattle native, and now we're finding him living in Syracuse. And we're going to talk a little bit about Jeff's book and then ask him some questions. Uh, the
Excellent.
book is the book is called Mud Season, and the Mud Season tells the story of Woody Hackworth, a disgraced newspaper reporter and wannabe novelist, resentful, bored, and looking for a way to get back at his ex-employer. Woody makes a fateful decision to write an environmental thriller and post chapters online as he goes. His novel in progress gains traction in the gossipy snowbound city of Icarus, New York. But now, not for reasons Woody wanted, his readers believe Woody is using his fiction to expose his in-laws and their successfully family-owned construction business. With each new post, Woody's domestic discord grows, but how can he stop now? He's almost famous. Mud Season merrily wallows in the classic conflict between ambition and family, digs into the murky perils of online notoriety, and slings a comic, tragic elegy to the daily newspaper. Okay, I kind of fudged that, and all I had to do was read. So 7 years of college shot down the drain because I can't read.
Yeah.
Uh, Jeff, talk a little bit about where the genesis and the idea of this book first came upon you. I think you mentioned something about it took you forever to write it, but the idea's been around a while.
Yeah, I was kicking around for about 20 years or more, almost as long as I've lived in Syracuse. Um, so I have my in-laws, they have a wholesaler business that deals with building materials, and they do a nice job. It's a well regarded company, and I used to think, well, what if it wasn't, and what if you had a reporter that was investigating his own family, and then I took it a step removed, and I said, well, what if it was a guy writing about this? And he was getting in trouble with his real family, and his real family was actually quite lovely. Wouldn't that be kind of funny? And it turned out it is funny. He's kind of trapped in this domestic hell of his own making, and he's got some decisions to make, and it seems to pull readers along who want to find out how he's going to get through this.
Well, talk a little bit about that. It seems like the structure is like is it kind of a throwback to serialized storytelling, like how Dickens used to get started, or is that not an adequate
I,
comparison?
I, I think it's perfectly legitimate to compare me to Charles Dickens. I think that's excellent. No, really what it is, it's more of a nod to what's going on in the online world now, where people go out there seeking immediate gratification and aren't always aware of the consequences that can result. And this guy ends up writing his book as he goes and posting it online, and he starts to generate interest because not for the reasons he hoped necessarily. People start to think he's writing about his actual in-laws. That just keeps stirring the pot and more interest. And of course, the more interest he has, the more hits he has. The more hits he has, the more he's intoxicated with this growing fame. And but meanwhile, his marriage and his relationship with his daughter. Did I answer your question, or did I just
Yeah,
ramble?
yeah, I answered the question. So I think what you're trying to say is sort of like it's serialized because that's the way the storytelling starts to evolve, and that's the way people absorb content now in little short
He well,
short
he is
pieces.
he is. he is serializing his novel. I'm writing about him, so it's really a novel in a novel kind of conceit, which where they weave back and forth and they ping pong off each other. What's happening in his real life affects what he's writing in his novel. What's happening in his novel affects his real life. So that's I would say that's probably the part of the book, the aspect of the book I'm the most proud of. To the structure is kind of intricate, but I do think it follows and it tracks for people. I did a couple of little tricks to make it easy for readers, and I hope I succeeded with that.
I'm intrigued about a couple of things. So first thing I'm intrigued about is the Nomer for Syracuse called Icarus. I'm assuming that's like a play on some a Greek thing or some mythological thing. And also, you mentioned how it's snowy. Is the snow and people being stuck inside um, any part of the book or any thematic element?
Not especially the let me talk first about the mud in mud season. Um, it really has sort of three different meanings. The book kind of begins in what we know here as mud season, kind of that cruddy in between winter and spring thing. But mud is also the euphemism in the sand and gravel industry, which concrete. Cement, concrete pouring, that world, they call it mud when it hasn't hardened yet. When it's being poured or trucked or whatever, it's in that semi-solid state, and they call it mud. So that is in play here. And then there's an existential mud that Woody is in. That he is really what the book is about. Him trying to pull himself out of mud. So that is mud. Now, what was the other thing you asked? The first part, you had a question about.
Well, I was just wondering the location and the setting
Yeah,
is
Icarus.
Icarus. Is
Icarus
that
is
it?
not right. Icarus, look at. I was just looking to play off all of the Greek and Roman names around here,
Yes.
and I could tell you that I very savvily thought about the main character Woody Hackworth flying too close to the sun and getting burned, but that wouldn't be true. I just like the sound of Icarus.
That's that's interesting because I don't know if you've ever. This is a little brief tangent. There's a YouTube video about how to pronounce upstate New York towns and cities and the Greek influence of all that as well because we have Ithaca, Syracuse. Um, what about your background as a journalist and how did this inform the book? And did you feel like one of the reasons it took a while is because you needed distance from that?
No, the reason I procrastinated for 20 years is because when I first started writing the book, I got blocked about how to keep releasing the novel he was writing. And I had a series of coincidences and, oh, he leaves his laptop open and, or he leaves stuff on the printer. And it all just started to seem kind of contrived. And after a while, it was strained. So I put it aside. I wrote plays instead for a while, and then all this social media exploded. Uh, Whereas it solved the problem. That's how he's going to release his book. He's going to do it online, the way a lot of people do now. So uh, that's it. Look, I was a newspaper reporter and a columnist for 35 years. I feel incredibly lucky because it was a real fun job while it lasted. But I think everybody knows what's happened to that industry. It's really been hollowed out. And there's not much compared to what it was, but I wanted to do kind of a pay on to it, an elegy, if you will, uh, um, and I wanted to do it in a funny way where it captures what's been happening to these newsrooms, and so that's part of what the book is about. Um, in fact, Woody is even getting teased by his agency for writing a book that's so because it's about newspapers. It's so out of date, and he goes, "Are you? Is this a historic novel?" And he's got to defend himself on those terms. So there's a lot of that bouncing around. It's certainly an element of the book. It's a lot of different aspects to mud season, but certainly the local journalism thing is part of it, big part of it.
So one of the things that I really like about your story is that um, you've been successful in different genres. and you've attempted other genres. I'm a dramatic, I'm a screenwriter and a playwright, and I can't really work in any other genre. But talk a little bit about the difference between writing plays and writing a novel, and what from playwriting helped you with maybe plotting or hooking the audience.
Well, good question, Craig. When I started to write Mud Season the first time, and I put it aside for a while, and then I looked at it and I thought, my dialogue is good. I write good dialogue, and I was really turning the pages quickly, and I would slow down a little bit when I got to my prose. And somebody said, "Well, why don't you take a class in playwriting?" And I did, and I really did take to that form, and I do love it a lot. The big difference is you have to write in a play with a three-dimensional reality in mind. If it can't happen on a stage, it can't happen in a play, and you can't write it. So the novel, of course, is completely different, where you can you can go inside somebody's head, literally, discuss what they're thinking, and you can go anywhere, you can do anything. It makes it very freeing and liberating and kind of terrifying, actually, as well. I definitely initially felt more comfortable in the playwriting form, because I could rely on the dialogue and I could rely on the structure. And this thing, I really had to kind of create my own structure.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I can't write novels. The freedom of that and going anywhere just makes me, terrifies me because I feel like
It's a little,
I have to tell a
right.
story in 2 hours. I would be all over the place.
It's a
Yeah.
little paralyzing, but I can tell you there is a similar thing when you probably have had this experience with your plays where you kind of hit this point and it's going to work. And then it starts to become a little more downhill and more fun, honestly. And the same thing happens with the book. You start to like, oh wow, this is happening, and the characters are starting to speak for themselves now, and instead of you laboriously having to pump words into their mouths, and something kind of cool happens in both of the genres.
Yeah. This is kind of a cliched question, but it's something that I think is relevant. All of your work involves some kind of humor, and I think right now we really need this, especially when the media is under attack and the situation is just very bleak. Um, how does how do you think humor helps shine a light on situations that people might not find accessible if the humor wasn't there?
Well, let me get my pipe here, Kashkasha. I've got this just for you, Craig. This is my dad's old pipe.
You need a
Um,
smoking jacket now. Yeah.
I know. I didn't complete the look, but
Okay.
I'm working on it. Look, I think humor it gives people permission to enter something, and a way of perceiving the world that lets people their guard goes down, right? They're just kind of there to laugh and to have a good time. And in the meanwhile, maybe they're actually picking up a message or two or learning something here or there. I realized from a pretty early age that it was a great way to persuade people, if you can be funny. I mean, that's kind of the part, and it is a very bleak time for many of us. And frankly, Craig, the only way that I could address it was to not address it directly. And so the book doesn't really get into that, but you'll find little references and things that'll probably clue you in that, I'm as aware as anybody about what's going on. I haven't tried to run and hide from it. I just didn't want to wallow in it because it's not that funny to me. And if it's not funny to me, it's not going to be funny to other people.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Now that you've kind of finally birthed this baby that you've been working on for so long, um, do you want to stick with this genre, or is it too early to tell, or was it too traumatic and painful, and you want to go back to something else?
No, no, I guess I would like to write another book, just to prove that I can do it again. But but there's a little bit of sadness because I'll never write another Mud season. This book is so different, and it's really the accumulation of a lifetime of experience. And I, I'm not going to be able to trade on the novel within a novel thing again. And there's a lot of things in this book I just have to say goodbye to, and then and that's look at I did it and I'm proud, I'm happy. But yeah, I'd like to do another one. And there's also a play I'd like to do. I hear you're doing musicals now. Maybe you can help me with one of those. I haven't done one of those yet.
Yeah, I do have a musical coming up. Yeah, I took a really great lyric writing course during the pandemic because I had nothing else to do but write lyrics. So yeah, and the composer I'm working with is 91 or 92. So it's about bootlegging, and I think she remembers that. So
Oh,
um,
I'm sure whatever you do be terrific. Let me know, okay? I'd love to see it. Maybe you give me an idea. I don't really have the musical background, although I can write really stupid lyrics. I'm good
yeah,
at that.
that's how I got hooked. I'm like, I need to write lyrics because they're short and sweet, but believe me, it's a lot harder than it looks. I
I
certainly struggled a
oh,
lot.
it actually looks hard, so I believe you.
What
Um,
about a
anyway,
memoir of your journalism adventures? Because you have a very infamous story about when you were a journalist. Um,
yes,
and
yeah.
actually,
Well, I was.
I was there at the same time, but I didn't know you then. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I didn't realize that you were in
Yeah,
Los Angeles during the riots. Yeah,
yes.
some of your listeners probably aren't going to even know this
They're not
happened.
going to
It's
be
so long
old
ago.
enough. So take us back to
No.
1992, Los Angeles. Fade in.
Fade in, yeah. So the Rodney King verdict had come in. I was freelancing for the Boston Globe in Southern California at that time, and I was sent out to get reaction from South Central LA to this verdict, which was for those of you who don't remember, don't know. A bunch of cops, beat up a motorist who was speeding, and white cops, black motorists for the most part, and they were all acquitted, even though the videotape of the beating was widely distributed and played all over again and again. And that's what touched off the riots, and so I got caught up in that, and I got. Um, I was trying to. I didn't even really know any riots were going on yet. It was very early on the first evening, but I ended up in a mob of people, and they shot the tires out in my car, and they tried to pull me out of the car, and they shot me twice in the leg and once in the upper back as I tried to get away. And very lucky to be alive, and very lucky that I came across two families in South Central Los Angeles, both African American, who frankly saved my life and got me to help. It was quite a night. I still have the bullet in me. None of this is in the book, but thanks for asking anyway.
Well, that beats my LA riot story. I was working at a dreadful temp job in downtown Los Angeles the day of the riots. And because I was a struggling screenwriter, so I would get an option, spend the money, then have to do a job. And
Yeah,
my roommate called me and said, "You need to get home as soon as possible." And when I left the building, it was completely deserted, and my car was parked like a half a mile away, and there was like fire on one side and fire on the other side, and I was told to not take the freeway, to go home side streets. Completely deserted the city. It was so creepy. And I pulling down this very narrow side street using my Thomas guide, and somebody ran by after they were looting a store carrying a lamp. I slammed on the brakes. They looked at me. I looked at them. They moved on, and I got home safely. So it's not nearly as fun as your story or as tragic, but that was
no,
my
go
LA
good.
rights art.
Well,
So,
you're smarter. That's why. I don't know.
well, it wasn't part of
I'm
my
just
job. So anyway, but
that was a problem. And then I just turned 30, so I still felt a little bit invincible.
right.
Not so much anymore. But yeah, it was a scary night. I remember I was in the hospital 3 nights, and I remember thinking I'm not even safe here. Like they're gonna, they're gonna set this place on fire. Really, really frightening turn of events.
Yeah, it was
And
a
in some ways, it prepared me for what's going on now because I came to realize that all of our civic institutions are really just constructs that we can choose to ignore, you know,
yeah.
including the Supreme Court.
That's yeah. It is a dark period. So once again, Jeff, where can we get the book? If we want people to buy it, can you give us some tips on where to buy
We
it? Where's the best
we
place to get
totally
it?
we want them to buy it. We want them to buy multiple copies of it. And you can just go on to Amazon, or you can go to barnesandnoble.com, or there's one called bookshop.org. They work well with independent bookstores like them. So, and you can go in any bookstore and order it. Hard to get it on the shelves these days. Most of the book sales take place online now.
Wow.
So,
Well,
but
I'm
it
looking forward to
should be
reading
easy.
it, and I would say that I could help you with sales if I gave it to all my friends. But I don't have any, so it's not going to happen.
Oh, of
Anyway,
course you do.
Jeff, thanks
Give
for
it to
talking.
both of them.
Jeff, that both of them, my two cats. Yeah, I'm working on training them to read. That's going to be a TikTok video. Uh, Jeff, thanks for talking to me today. The book is called Mud Season, and I will put a link to where you can buy the book and the story when I publish it on the website. And you can find more stories on arts and entertainment on Craig's Diddalus at www. I always forget a W. nytv.com. Jeff, thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot. I really appreciate the help.
All right, take care.
Okay, you too. Bye bye.